Hi, I'm Luca Lo Schiavo, ERRA Regulatory Specialist. I'm happy to be here today with Marc McGranaghan of EPRI, that is a very important consortium based both in US and in Europe. Marc is the partner of EPRI for Europe. EPRI is very important in research, innovation, and they have many projects all over the world in a lot of topics that we will touch together today. Marc made a contribution to ERRA Annual Conference in Bratislava, and he opened his presentation with a provocation. Marc, you say that the energy transition is primarily a regulatory design challenge. What did you mean by that?
Well, we have so much work to do in the energy transition that involves investment in the grid to integrate renewables, to integrate energy storage, to integrate customer demand, and make that part of the way we plan and operate the grid. So besides investing in the grid infrastructure itself, which has been very traditional, we also need to invest in flexibility and new technologies. And this really involves regulatory innovation and new approaches for how we coordinate, the planning and design and investment strategy for the grid of the future.
Let's see, for instance, the numbers that Euroelectric presented in their report. The Euroelectric says that required grid investments are at 67 billion per year through
Yeah, and
2050.
this is
It's enormous.
this is double. This is double what we've been investing in the grid. Is a 100% increase that's been required. We see that kind of increase in the approved investment here in Ireland, that the regulator approved. The ASB's investment over the next 5 years is that kind of increased number. So the investment is tremendous, but it also needs to include, the smart grid investments.
My question is, Euroelectric says that around 43% of that need is demand driven. So it depends directly on how demand evolves. But what is the implication? For instance, what happens if this demand does not appear concretely?
Yeah, that's a good question. And there, especially with things like data centers and the digital infrastructure associated with that, some of those demand increases are not totally clear. So there's a lot of uncertainty in how that demand is going to develop, and being flexible in terms of the way we expand the grid is obviously very critical.
Yes,
At the
that's
same
that's
time,
very important.
we want to be able to supply that demand. That, it's critical to the economic well-being of these countries, and everything depends on reliable and resilient electric infrastructure, especially, as we're trying to electrify heat and transport, which is a lot of that demand increase as well.
In fact. And what is your opinion about the idea of anticipatory investments? That is an important point of your electric proposal. Is
Yeah,
this truly a regulatory challenge, or what's your idea about that?
yeah, I'm definitely feel like anticipatory investments in the grid is a very important part of the strategy. Strategies like, only touching the grid once, so when we go in to improve the resilience and reliability and capability of the grid, we'd like to not have to go back to that same feeder again in 2 years and make more changes. So if we can anticipate what the requirements are going to be within the next 5 years or so and make those investments in an efficient manner, I think it can be a win-win in terms of having an anticipatory strategy, but also an efficient strategy for making those investments. And that's a regulatory challenge in terms of how to manage that.
Yeah. Another regulatory challenge are tariffs. You argued in your conference at the conference that tariffs are not just a cost recovery mechanism; they are an active tool for managing electrification. Uh, for instance, you made a reference to a consulting report stating that when we arrive at a very high EV penetration, the choice of tariff structure can make the difference uh, with the network capacity. So can you elaborate about the difference in that case between flat volumetric tariff and dynamic tariff or capacity based charges?
Yeah, and there's so many different ways to implement flexibility as part of the challenge of optimizing investments in the grid, and tariffs is definitely one of them. In the US, we see some strategies that involve direct control. We have demand, we have market structures to have customers participate in particular localized flexibility needs. But I think tariffs is really in terms of the grid of the future and the ability to have automated responses on, with intelligence on the part of the customer to respond to tariffs that reflect the needs of the grid. That can be a very important part of the strategy.
Of course, this means that we need smart meter rollout, of course. But you know that within ERRA countries, there is a very differentiated situation about smart metering rollout. There are many countries that started this rollout, but not so many already arrived at a high percentage of customer covered with smart meters. So, which is your suggestion in that case? Better to complete the rollout before starting with new tariff, or to have or better to start some boxes or
Yeah, I
even
don't think
some
there's
initial.
I don't think there's any harm in learning from trial applications and sandboxes, and as long as, they involve the rollout of smart metering to enough customers that we can at least learn from those trials, and it's not just a few customers here and there, but enough to really understand how customers are going to respond, and what kind of technologies can take advantage of the smart metering to help the customers respond to smart tariffs. But we do need to accelerate the overall deployment because the smart metering is at the foundation of implementing this flexibility. There's no question about that. And we're at kind of a very important time with the smart metering as well for those countries that haven't really done much and made a lot of progress in the deployment. There's an opportunity to kind of jump ahead to what we call AMI 2.0 and take advantage of even more intelligence in the meters that's available today with the chips that can, for the sensors and the localized computation capability. The smart meters can provide even more benefits for the customers, may be able to implement things like equipment diagnostics within the house and things like that going forward. There'll be a lot of opportunities for new services. So
Yes, I
it
agree.
needs
I
to be
agree.
really
I agree.
carefully evaluated.
A very important point for me is the interface of data between the smart meter locally and the in-home devices. And look at EV charging and especially V1G and V2G. In your presentation, you talked about the Utrecht example. This is an important city in the Netherlands where there is already an experiment with some, you say, 50 Renault cars that are able, fleet that is able to use V2G, so bidirectional exchange with the grid. And probably is this the first scale, let's say, V2G experience, or is this already available otherwhere? Which is the
Yeah,
situation?
the situation is that V2G is still not being taken advantage of really in very many places, and it's partly the additional challenge of treating a customer as a generator, and interconnection requirements are more complicated for a generator than they are for
Mm.
just managing the charging. But the potential benefits in terms of flexibility are so much greater. You're talking about a 60 kilowatt hour, 65, 70 kilowatt hour battery in your driveway compared to a lot of people that are putting PV on the rooftop are buying 7 kilowatt hour or 14 kilowatt hour batteries to provide flexibility when they could have a battery 10 times that, um, to provide flexibility, right in their driveway. And I think it's such a big game changer for locations where resilience is important. And we're seeing products come on the market that can you have grid forming inverters that can provide power to the home when the grid is not available, and provide that resilience function in addition to the flexibility. So the value proposition is so much greater with the vehicle to grid, that we really
Yes, yes.
get our
The very point
together.
is interoperability. Is interoperability.
It is the
And
main point. It is
it
taking
is.
advantage of these technologies means that we have to have standards for how we collect the data and manage the data
We don't
interface.
have yet. We don't have yet.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean, only
getting
local
there.
standards, but there is not yet in European unique or even global unique standard.
Yeah, I think, with the Netherlands is jumping ahead, taking advantage of OpenADR 3.0, which is a brand new version of OpenADR. The, the open charge point protocols are moving forward with vehicle to grid applications. And I think we need to look at leaders like the Netherlands, learn from their deployments, and really accelerate the adoption of these interoperability approaches.
Thank you. Another point that you touched in your presentation in Bratislava was flexible connections. May I ask you, I know that EPRI is very engaged with data center flexibility. May I ask you to explain, are data center truly flexible? Can they reach flexibility for what a part of their capacity or their time, or not? Or is their
Well,
demand rigid?
they, uh, they do no question that they can be flexible with the investment in technologies to provide that flexibility, like energy storage and backup generation, that allow them to continue to perform their function, but be flexible in terms of being a load on the grid. There are some examples where they can be flexible in their actual process as well, which is even more beneficial if they don't need to be firing up diesel generators or gas generators to provide that flexibility. So and so especially some of the data center applications that involve training, it's not absolute requirement that it be done instantaneously in response to someone's query or like inference processing. So I think there are some examples where getting flexibility from the process, may be part of the strategy, but being flexible, and even if it involves making a larger investment in the actual technologies that are being used as part of the data center, is like a requirement for some of these data centers to even get connected. Without a flexible contract, they're going to have to wait years for system capacity to be there. So they are looking at the investment required to be a flexible resource.
Mhm. From data center, we have we can start to talk about affordability, because in US the PJM experience shows that there is an affordability issue related to the growth of demand driven by the AI data center. So the issue of affordability is now back, let's say. And
It's
my
it's
point is that there is a distributional equity dimension in the energy transition. Do EPRI has any suggestion to policy how to build the tariff roadmap in order to make transition sustainable, socially sustainable?
Yeah, I think it's a very important aspect of many different locations that are dealing with data centers. Texas is implementing interesting contracts that are supposedly protect the affordability aspect for the consumers, so that translating some of the investment requirements in the grid and the infrastructure and new generation to the data centers, or at least protecting the average customer from the amortization of those investments that would
They
have to
so
be
call it
carried
grandma.
through.
They say to protect the grandma. Yes, in US they use this
Exactly.
wording. Yeah, yeah.
And, yeah,
That's
so
a
we're
very
seeing that in
important point.
Ohio and Texas.
We say vulnerable customers in Europe.
Yeah, well, even just we're all vulnerable customers. If we don't want, the prices of electricity are getting so high that just your average worker is having trouble you know handling that part of their utility bills. So it's very important that we're not transferring costs that are caused by a particular load class or load category, and spreading those costs across all the other customers. So it's the opportunity to really build contracts and approaches that provide some protection for customers is very important regulatory consideration, and I think in Europe it's absolutely critical.
Thank you. So the annual conference was just concluded. You participated really actively. I want to thank you for your contribution. What's your message? The message that you hope stays after Bratislava? What your final single point that you want to give to regulators that are listening to this talk?
Yeah, well, I think that, we used the term, this shared energy economy, of really building a system that integrates the customer with the planning and operation of the system, whether it's a data center or it's a regular customer with an electric vehicle, building the standards and approaches for making sure that the DSO, the TSO takes advantage of the capabilities of the customer to participate, and implements the standards that are required for that, and also, provides the economic incentives for them to participate.
I understand you mean the active role of customer can reach an optimal in economics. Everybody can save as a total if the customer are more active.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I get concerned that we make tremendous investments in large energy storage systems on the transmission grid, but we don't put the same effort into taking advantage of flexibility that could be provided by every customer.
At behavior level. Yes, I understand. That's very important. Otherwise, technology is an investment not well exploited, let's say.
Exactly.
So, Marc, thank you very much for your contribution. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, and I hope
Thank
there
you
will
so
be
much.
other opportunities. Thank you very much.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Luca. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Marc. Thank you.